Welcome back, everyone, here to Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Mike Page. Thanks again for joining us on this evening as we bring you some breaking news now that we want to bring to you. We are learning right now that the U.S. has launched retaliatory strikes on ISIS targets in Syria. President Trump putting out this message on Truth Social just a little bit ago, saying, because of ISIS's vicious killing of brave American patriots in Syria, whose beautiful souls I welcomed home to American soil earlier this week in a very dignified ceremony, I am hereby announcing that the United States is inflicting very serious retaliation, just as I promised, on the murderous terrorists responsible. We are striking very strongly against ISIS strongholds in Syria, a place soaked in blood which has many problems, but one that has a bright future if ISIS can be eradicated. The government of Syria, led by a man who is working very hard to bring greatness back to Syria and is fully in support. All terrorists who are evil enough to attack Americans are hereby warned. You will be hit harder than you have ever been hit before if you in any way attack or threaten the USA. So that was from President Trump just a little bit ago on X, and we wanted to bring that to your attention here on Live Now from Fox. We want to continue to get some analysis and insight on this matter. I'm joined in now by my next guest to help break it all down from FDD, David Daoud. Thanks so much, David, for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And David, this wasn't really a question of if, but when.
Yes, absolutely. It's a pleasure being on. Yeah, look, President Trump has made it clear in the past that anyone who targets U.S. interests, U.S. personnel, or U.S. nationals is going to pay a price. In some ways, this is reminiscent of the strike on January 2nd, if I'm calling the date correctly, of 2020, that killed Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force, after Iraqi militias that were allied with Iran, killed a U.S. citizen in Iraq. So President Trump, for years, has now made it very clear that if you attack Americans, if you kill Americans abroad, there will be a heavy price to pay.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And tell us a little bit about how these, operations are really just planned and executed. Obviously, it seemed like there was talk between the United States and Syria to give a heads up on this.
I mean, that's as far as we can understand, right? Syria recently entered the anti-ISIS coalition, the global coalition to fight ISIS. We have continued presence in Syria. We seem to be tightening coordination, or at least ties, between the United States and the new Syrian government. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that there was some kind of coordination or cooperation or some intelligence share between the United States and the new Syrian authorities, who may have some knowledge about where these continued presence of ISIS is throughout their country.
And David, in that post there by President Trump, he said he wants to eradicate ISIS from Syria. Just how involved would that be to try to eradicate ISIS from that country?
I mean, look, I think perhaps President Trump is being characteristically a little dramatic in that post. It's a little bit more difficult to eradicate a movement like ISIS, with as much as it's been degraded over the past years, just from the air, just with air power. So it would require more boots on the ground, more commitment, at least if we're going to do it ourselves. The United States is going to do it ourselves. It would require more boots on the ground than the 1,000 or so soldiers that we have. At the same time, President Trump has made it clear, he even came into office on this promise, that there would be no new Middle Eastern wars in which the United States was involved. So my sense is there's a little bit of, the dramatic flair, but President Trump will authorize the continuation of punitive strikes against ISIS. Now, will this bring about the organization's demise? Just because this is mostly air power, my sense is no, unless we cooperate with partners on the ground who have troops on the ground. We provide the air cover, they provide the boots, and through that we continue to push to destroy and dismantle what remained of ISIS after our campaign almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah, that's so true, David. And can President Trump, the White House, and other officials put some pressure on Syria to say, look, we really want you to target ISIS so that these operations against our U.S. American soldiers don't happen again.
Well, look, there's a couple of questions here. First of all, are you asking, do we have leverage over Syria? We, of course, do. Right? We have sanctions that existed on Syria since the Assad regime that the new Syrian government wants removed. They want integration into the global community, the global trade market, to be able to rebuild the country after 10 years of destruction at the hands of Iran, its allies, and Russia. So we do, I mean, we are the gateway to that, right? So we do have considerable leverage to pressure Syria to act against these remnants of ISIS. The question then is, given the pedigree of the leadership in Syria, it's not that they themselves were not involved in similar organizations. These organizations may have had their own problems with ISIS, but President Assad's origins lay in al-Qaeda. The question is, do we trust the Syrian government to get the job done? Now, again, they have their own interests in combating ISIS, so that may propel things forward. But there is a question mark still over whether President Assad has genuinely recanted from his former views, or whether his new posture is merely a tactical change.
And lastly, what is this move by the U.S. With these strikes against ISIS targets here? Does this put notice to other terrorists around the world?
Of course it does. I mean, the question is whether that notice will be taken to heart, in the sense that the attacker that killed the two U.S. service members in Syria just a few days ago, it doesn't seem like he was given orders necessarily from a central ISIS command to carry out the attack to kill the two U.S. service members. So it's harder to deter someone like that who is influenced by the ideology of the Islamic State and its remnants versus taking orders directly. Right? There's no brakes on someone like that. Will that give pause to future lone wolves? It may, but it's not like this individual didn't know that the United States would retaliate. The question is whether they nevertheless viewed the price as worth it.
Yep, there we go. David Dawood, thank you so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox, giving us some great insight as always. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You take care. All right, everyone. We want to continue to get some more insight here on Live Now from Fox. Put on X just a little bit ago from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, saying earlier today, U.S. forces commenced Operation Hawkeye Strike in Syria to eliminate ISIS fighters, infrastructure, and weapon sites in direct response to the attack on U.S. forces that occurred on December 13th in Syria. This is not the beginning of a war. It is a declaration of vengeance. The United States of America, under President Trump's leadership, will never hesitate and never relent to defend our people there. Jennifer Griffin, Fox News, put this on X, a great rundown of what happened, saying that the U.S. military carried out strikes against 50 ISIS targets in Syria over the past 2 hours. A senior U.S. official tells Fox following Saturday's attack by a member of the Syrian security forces with alleged ties to ISIS, which left 2 members of the Iowa National Guard and an American civilian translator dead. The U.S. military struck more than 50 ISIS targets following the president's order to hit them hard. U.S. Central Command launched what a U.S. official described to Fox as a massive strike on dozens upon dozens of ISIS targets in an operation called Operation Hawkeye Strike. Iowa is the Hawkeye state. The strikes took place at multiple locations across Syria and included more than 50 targets. The targets include ISIS infrastructure and weapons storage sites there. So a great rundown from Jennifer Griffin on what these strikes included.